My name is Kim Porter. I'm the executive director of Be a Part of the Conversation. I am so glad Ben is here. Ben is back, as we said in our email blast. Very big thank you to Montgomery County Office of Drug and Alcohol. This is our fourth in a 5-year grant that we have called the Youth Marijuana Prevention Project. I am sure hoping we re-up for another 5 years because we are a long way from resolving the many complexities around what we currently have in Pennsylvania here, which is medical marijuana and potentially soon to be adult use. So this page on our website, conversation.zone is our website, and then /YMPP is where you can learn more about this project that has many components to it. This component tonight is our community awareness, but we also are going to be talking to a lot of other really important folks in the state of Pennsylvania throughout this next few years to continue to educate around this topic. I hope that you'll submit questions. I know that Ben likes questions. We like to feel like we're having a conversation. It's pretty tricky to do here on Zoom. So especially because this is a webinar format, we know you're out there, but please feel free to use the Q&A or the chat. We are recording this, but yay for you for being here in live because we like the questions. We like to hear from you. And a lot of what Ben says may bring up some questions for you. So please feel free to do that. And I'll be sharing some links in the chat as soon as I finish sharing my screen. But one of them will be for this survey that will pop up at the end of this program. Please take a moment. I know you're all busy. I know when this is over, you want to get on with your lives, but it just takes a few minutes to fill this out. It helps us so much to know, was this helpful? What would you like to hear about in the future? And so on. So please take a moment to complete the survey at the end of tonight's program. Coming up, I want to tell you about just at least one program that is relatively in line with what we're talking about tonight, because we are talking about young people. Alcohol is still the number one substance of choice for our young people if they're going to consume a substance. So we're going to talk about under 18-year-olds drinking alcohol. Is it a rite of passage? We hear this kind of language a lot, and it's a little disconcerting because it certainly doesn't need to be. And we'll be talking about that in person, in a room, live with other humans, which we're doing about 50% of the time this year. We're really excited to be back in the rooms with people, and that'll be in Plymouth meeting. But you can learn about this program and many more on our website, on our calendar, our event calendar. So I'll be dropping that link in the chat as well. You can register there for the program on alcohol and other programs. I always like to mention, this is where my heart is, these parent partnership meetings save me. I'm the parent of someone in recovery, and we really need each other. We family members find this all very confusing and overwhelming and sometimes very frightening. And we really do need support from one another. We have many meetings taking place both online and in person. You can visit this page on our website to find these meetings. Each of these buttons you can click on and get details about the Zoom link, where it meets, all that sort of stuff. So please check that out if you're a parent who could use some support. We are also very excited to have a new component to our organization this year called the Family Recovery Course. This is a 3-part series, no charge to attend. Same goes for the parent partnership meetings, by the way. We cap this course at 12 participants. This is not prevention. This is for parents, guardians, caregivers who've identified that they know that their child has a substance use disorder. We're going to do a lot of, it's been amazing. I have to tell you, we talk about Addiction 101, what happened to my child, what happened to my family, and how can I, as a family member, recover, regardless of how my son or daughter's path might go. This has been wonderful. We have funding from Montgomery County, Chester County, and Bucks counties, but it is free to anyone who would like to attend, and you can learn more about that on our website as well. So just a little bit, because we're going to be learning lessons from Colorado, I thought we'd give a little bit of context. And here we are in Pennsylvania, where we have medical marijuana legalized. And Ben, I'm pretty sure this is an up-to-date map. I know that New Jersey now has adult use legalized. Notice I'm calling it adult use and not recreational. I would love for us to get used to that vernacular, because when we're talking to young people, especially when we call it recreational marijuana, it just sounds like way too much fun. So let's call it adult use, which is really the legal term for it. But here we are in PA, where it is legal for medical use. There is a lot of pending legislation for adult use. And I'll just tell you a little bit about the kinds of forms that are sold here in PA. You can learn a lot more about this on the state's medical marijuana website. And these are the 23 disorders that are listed. I know we also often get a lot of questions about medical marijuana in particular. So these are the 23 conditions. The ones that are circled are what we've been told are the most frequently cited for getting a medical marijuana card here in PA. And my colleague, Judy Hirsch, who is out at another program this evening, but she's an attorney, and she just attended a continuing law education program from Pennsylvania about medical marijuana, and she shared some of this data. Sorry for all the text, but almost 4% of Pennsylvanians, meaning about 500,000 Pennsylvanians, have a medical marijuana card right now and are active patients. 6% are enrolled in the program currently. That's compared to most states that have legalized medical marijuana that have about 2% of their population enrolled. So we're kind of ahead of the game there. 2,000 physicians in Pennsylvania are approved to certify patients, and there are currently 168 medical marijuana dispensaries here in PA. And a little bit more detail there, but I can share this on that follow-up page. It's not there quite yet, but I will share that with you. That is all that I have. And I'm not going to read a bio about Ben because he's really good about telling you his background, but I just want to say I am so grateful that you are a frequent flyer with us here at Be a Part of the Conversation. Ben's been here in person and joining us tonight via Zoom from beautiful Colorado. Thank you so much for being here, Ben.
It's my pleasure, Kim. The world needs more Kim Porters. I hope all of you out there agree with that. Seeing those resources was so cool. Thanks for everything that you're doing. And I've got a sister in Bucks County and a nephew who's 12 and just about the coolest kid in the entire world. And knowing that they're benefiting and will continue to benefit from the work that you've done means a ton, because I really love that little fella. He's going to end up being a better fisherman than I am soon, which will frustrate me a little bit. We have quite a bit to cover tonight, and I'm going to be a little judicious in what we talk about. Kim, I got a note at the beginning of this that somebody was having trouble, that their chat was disabled. So can we double check that and make sure that people's chats are enabled? Because I've actually got my chat screen up right now. I'd love, if you don't mind, if you could type in here if you have been a part of one of the presentations that I've done before. It'll help give me a better idea of who's in the room, I guess, so to speak. It's always really challenging to do these things virtually. I mean, it's awesome because, like, I'm at my house, but the challenge is I don't get to see you and be with you and be a part of the community for a day or two leading up to it, and most importantly, have some time to hang out and chat afterwards. I got a lot of really great questions. Can you guys check that message board, Kim? I see.
Yeah, I put a chat in there, but I'm not sure. Let's see. I looked at my permissions. It doesn't look like anything. We always allow chatting. I see stuff in Q&A. Q&A is definitely working.
Oh, okay. Let's just do Q&A. We'll use that.
Yeah, people can't respond. I'll try to work on that on the back end. But fire away, Ben.
Did Duke Rumley seriously just log into this? What's up, brother? He is coming over to my house to take my son out for dinner pretty soon because he was all broken up over this. And thank you for that affirmation, Duke. I try my best on the fishing. The thing that I've got to do is to really start with some rudimentary stuff, or else we're going to get lost in it. So for those of you who have seen one of these presentations before, I apologize. The first couple of minutes of it really are going to be review for you. And I'm seeing that so many of you are realizing that it's the chat's not working. Yes, let's all use the Q&A thing and see if that'll do it. Okay, so I'm going to try and share my screen. Kim, let me know if this works. It should. It'll totally work.
Of course it will. You're a pro.
Assuming I have the presentation up that I'm trying to give you. Hang on one second.
Let's see. Man, I cannot figure out why the chat won't work.
Sorry, guys, I got too many windows open. I actually just came from a long session trying to work on the follow-up book that I'm writing. Kim, can you see that okay?
Yes, you're not in presenter yet, though.
About to be. Here we go.
In the sidewise stuff.
Okay, cool.
Now you're good. Yes, sir.
Awesome. I'm really working on getting a follow-up book together because the last one was published in 2017, and that's just an eternity. I mean, that's like the Bronze Ages of cannabis in Colorado, and it's going at such a breakneck pace that I think a lot of people are having trouble keeping up. So I'm gonna do my best with the idea that I have for this group right here, and knowing Kim and knowing what the organization is. I assume that most of you are parents, a lot of you are educators, maybe law enforcement, medical professionals, but we're going to try and cover what I think is the relevant stuff. Here's some background. I do all sorts of things, and we'll get to some of them maybe. I'd really like to point out, especially since Duke's logged on, this last bullet point here under affiliations. I've been able to sit on the board of directors for a very dear friend's nonprofit for a while now called SAFE, Sober AF, and it totally means that, entertainment. And the idea behind this is to provide access to sober sections at events. So everything from concerts, music festivals, to athletic events. And there certainly are plenty that take place on the East Coast, plenty that take place in the tri-state area. And it's a really, really cool thing for young people to be able to go to the game and sit with other folks who are sober, to be able to go to a show and sit with other folks who are sober. So please look into that organization. Because they're doing pretty good work right now. The one thing I'll point out that I don't know if it happened between now and the last time that I was with you is there was a book published 2 years ago. It was published by a company called Springer, and Springer publishes all of like the medical manuals and textbooks in the country. And so they wanted to put together a medical textbook as well as a desk reference for all things cannabis. So if any of you are in the medical profession, you might want to get that. It's called Cannabis in Medicine, an evidence-based approach. And because it's a medical textbook, it's like super expensive. It's like $100. But I got to co-author the chapter on treatment and recovery alongside my dear friend, Dr. Letitia Bader. And we learned a lot because as far as we know, it was really the first published best practices for what it looks like to work with the cannabis dependent patient. And we're certainly learning a lot, but that old adage, what we know is a bucket, what we don't is an ocean. There's still so much that we're trying to figure out on this subject. It's very, very complex medically. So my full-time job, and I think I was doing this last time I was with you, Kim, but I work for a treatment center in Steamboat Springs, ski country, Colorado, where we treat men with substance use disorder, and hopefully in the very near future, we'll have facilities that'll be open to women too. And of course, a pretty significant portion of what we treat is cannabis use disorder, just because of the work that I do. And I've run that program for the last 3 years now. And it's something that I'm very, very proud of what we do and the work that we got going too. So let's start at the beginning. Let's jump into this. And like I said before, for those of you who've been a part of it, I'm sorry, I got to do a little bit of review or else it's just not going to make any sense to everybody else. So I want you to consider what this advertisement's saying, the same one I've been using for almost 10 years now, this picture. This is the new school cannabis. It's not what you smoked in the 70s. And the importance of understanding that just can't really be overstated, because so often we find ourselves engaged in conversations thinking about a plant. We certainly continue to legislate a plant. And the reality is that the commercial market hasn't revolved around the sale of organic material for a number of years. I mean, we certainly still sell buds and flower and that kind of thing, but it's not the primary. Where the money really is and what everybody's selling are concentrates and edibles, and concentrate infused edibles, and of course the vaping. We'll get to all that, don't worry. But I'd like you, if you can, to try to suspend your idea of what you think marijuana is, because the reality is it doesn't matter what you did in the 70s. Like, I don't care how many times you saw Led Zeppelin play, or in the 80s and your Depeche Mode shows, or me in the 90s with going to see Snoop. Like, none of that stuff is relevant anymore, because it's basically a substance that isn't consumed now. In fact, the very first chapter of the next book, the one I'm working on, is the need to change our vernacular around it, and how we've got to stop saying cannabis is this all-encompassing word for, everything from a CBD based cream to a distillate. And the issue is that without having more specific vocabulary, we kind of continue to go back to thinking about this as a plant, a relatively benign plant, something humankind interacted with for millennium leading up to this. When what we're really talking about is a commercial market that is built to sell THC. Did I just see Ginger on here? Ginger, you'll be happy, because I, as always, am going to mention what you guys are doing over there in Eastern Pennsylvania. This market isn't about a whole plant. This is a market about one specific component of that plant. And that component is THC. So listen, there's like 200 and some chemicals inside of cannabis before you light it on fire, 500 and some during and post combustion. But there's two of them that we really, really care about. And Kim, since you have heard this so many times and you could probably give it better yourself, what are the two chemicals that we really care about inside of the cannabis plant?
Are you asking me? Or are you just saying it?
I'm asking
CBD
you.
and THC.
Yes, CBD and THC. And why do we care about CBD?
Because it has potential to be very helpful medicinally.
Yep. The medicine is in the THC, without getting like into applied.
You said it wrong.
The medicine's in the CBD. Without getting into like applied chemistry, we can say that it gets really complex if we want to. And Kim, unmute. Why do we care about THC?
Because it's a psychoactive ingredient. It's causing some serious problems for our loved ones.
THC is the, all capital letters, psychoactive component inside of cannabis. If you don't have THC, you have hemp. You have a plant that played a really important role in early American textiles, and got into a lot of trouble because it looked like its cousin. THC is the reason you get high. And the market is a market to support the sale of THC, not the sale of cannabis. So let's break down why that matters. These data are just beautiful. And if you haven't heard me go on about how fantastic they are, you should watch some other stuff I've done. I won't take the time now, but University of Mississippi has given us just a fantastic data set, really from 1960 to 2010. We do have data from 2010. I got it on pretty good authority that we will see a continuation of this chart next year at some point. But there's so much that we can glean from this, because what it is This is a representative sample of cannabis that was confiscated in every state in the country. And what they did at Ole Miss was got us the aggregate and taught us a lot about cannabis in America. And the first thing that I'd like to point out, there's really only a couple of things that I want to highlight here. We just don't have time to get into too much of the botany of it. But the first thing that I'd like to point out to you is right here. Is 1960, when we first begin measuring the cannabis plant and the THC inside of it. What you see is a really solid representation of what is accepted to be naturally occurring inside of the cannabis plant. And we've actually found mummified cannabis plants inside of tombs in ancient Asia and Africa, up to 2,000 years old. So, like, think about that, man. Like, it was that important that 2,000 years ago, there was some like ruler over in Asia who was like, throw a little bit of that in there with me, just in case, Cannabis for millennium was a really benign plant, to be very frank with you. If we were to stretch this line back forever, till humankind crawled out of the ocean or walked out of the garden or fell from the stars or whatever the hell happened. If we followed this back forever, it would always be between 0.2 and 0.5% THC is our average THC. This is really important for you in the discussions that I think that you're probably going to engage in that if you're anything like me, you've heard multiple times, it's natural, it's natural, it's natural. And what I like to make sure that the person who's telling me that understands is that in its natural form, cannabis has less than 0.5% THC. And very interestingly, although we didn't begin to measure it until the mid 80s, it also has 0.5% CBD. And to get into just a little bit of the 201 stuff, one of the reasons why that's so incredible is, in addition to CBD's got some really, really cool medicinal properties. But listen, let me be very clear. The vast majority of what people tell you CBD is going to fix is dramatically overstated. In fact, like, anytime somebody tells you it'll cure like hangnails, male pattern baldness, and cancer, like, they're probably just trying to sell you something. Like, just be aware, let the little things go off there. But CBD has like this like miracle drug standing when it comes to some very specific seizure disorders. And since there's a very little bit that modern medicine knows about epilepsy and other seizure disorders, we're taking this and we're using it to some great effect with some very sick young people. The other thing that most people don't know about CBD is it's also a pretty cool antipsychotic. In fact, 2 years ago, Journal of Psychiatry published an article, and they said, we very well may see a whole new classification of antipsychotic drugs that are CBD based. And nobody would be growing that plant and extracting it and putting it into a pill. This would be synthesized CBD. It's much cheaper, it's predictable, and you actually know what's in it. That's a really nice part about it too. But as we have gone from a 1-to-1 ratio of THC to CBD to more and more and more THC, the plant that God gave us, the plant that it comes from nature, has really had this awesome thing that's been built into it removed. And the thing that was built into it was this antipsychotic that always kept THC in check. So forget, I'll elaborate on that later. The last thing that I would like to illustrate to you is that over the course of 50 years, weed got a whole lot stronger. And if you're finding yourself asking why, I would like to ask how long ago you immigrated to America from Canada, because in America, this is just how we do stuff. If one is more, two is better. Like, we supersize our damn Big Macs, okay? Like, when we find out something can get us high, we're going to get high, and we're going to make it as strong as we can. All right, bonus points, because I know I have some aficionados in here. I am going into the Q&A section, and I would like to ask if anybody knows what happened, Q&A, not chat, if anybody knows what happened right here, so end of the 70s, what led to this really dramatic spike in potency in North America? I'll give you a second to fill that in. Again, I know we got some subject matter experts here. Maybe I'm going the wrong way. Yep. Nope. Nobody? Any guesses, Kim?
Cheech and Chong movies? I don't know. What
Duke says
happened?
Humboldt County. No, Duke is sort of right, as he should be, because of the amount of cannabis he consumed when he was using. No, that's not it. What ended up happening was a bunch of guys from Northern California, Duke in all likelihood, Humboldt County, they went over to Pakistan and sowed a bunch of cannabis indica seeds into their clothing and brought cannabis indica back to the United States. So this is, in all likelihood, pretty sure of it, this is the introduction of cannabis indica. And then we just get stronger and stronger and stronger as we use those hybrids. Now, the most important thing I'm going to tell you and share with you tonight is the next slide. Note we go from increments of 2.5 to increments of 5 to capture these data. And Colorado is the blue line. And as you'll notice, we don't have any data past 2015. Last week or a week or two ago, or I don't know, a little while ago, I did an interview with, it was some like international thing, and they were awesome with their fact checking. And it ended up being like an hour-long interview. I got bored watching me. I don't know how anybody else did, made it through that. But one of the things I said in the interview was that Colorado hasn't tested a product for potency or purity since 2015. In anything that looks like independently validated data. We got a couple state-run labs, but they have a huge vested interest. And so this news organization called everywhere, I mean, Marijuana Enforcement Division, the governor's office, everybody, and they were like, that's actually true. You guys, the thought leaders on regulated cannabis sales, as we're commonly thought of, we haven't tested a product for potency or purity independently since 2015. Now, if we took the Colorado Marijuana Enforcement Division at their word, which I'm pretty nascent to do, you should watch this interview and see. I made the claim that the Marijuana Enforcement Division is just basically a training ground for consultants to the industry. And then we looked up how many people have gone from MED to the industry. It's pretty incredible. So with a grain of salt, let's take the Colorado Marijuana Enforcement Division at their word. The data that they published last year, we still haven't gotten our annual report this year, and it's 2 months late. Says that the average product sold in Colorado in 2020 is 63% THC. So let's contextualize this a little bit. Have any of you guys ever heard that old joke that the most dangerous part about weed is getting caught with it? It's certainly something I said quite a bit in my using days. I'm somebody in recovery myself. I don't want to give you the wrong impression here, because there's good data. If any of you read Alex Brenson's book, you know he makes a case for kind of deep historical issues with it. And there's actually reports as far back as 1600 of some mental illness associated with cannabis use. But the point that I would like to make here is that was an outlier. It was rather extreme. And in all likelihood, this was somebody with a really significant genetic predisposition. If you had problems with this plant, you were the exception, not the rule. And you do not have to look hard, my friends, to see why we made cannabis illegal. And this is going to be really relevant in a minute. And I'm sorry if I offend anybody's politics or anything. Actually, no, I'm not. I don't care about your politics at all. This is public health. America's done some great stuff, and America's done some awful stuff. the criminalization of cannabis comes from the awful stuff category, where in 1937, when we made cannabis illegal, like, you do not have to look hard at all to see written papers by our country's leaders saying things like, to summarize it, this is really going to help us get some more of those black and brown people in jail. This is something we can do to get into their jazz clubs, their barrios. They say barrios and jazz clubs, seriously. And we can prosecute them and we can get them locked up. The problem is that injustice of so long ago, I think in a lot of ways has led to an equal injustice today, because this plant was relatively benign and we didn't see many issues with it. This drug, if you can see my cursor, the blue line that is the drug, THC, is kicking our butts. We've never seen anything like this with THC. As soon as we start talking about it with people who know and understand, and that there's kind of this, like, there's this camaraderie that comes about when you're with other people who are frontline providers, when we're all just like, when is the world going to wise up to this? Because what we're seeing is unprecedented. It's not good, and it's totally moving in the wrong direction. And there's some interesting stuff about the way that it's manifesting inside of the human brain and body. But let me be very clear with you. Again, my beef isn't with the cannabis plant. Mine is with the commercialized THC industry. And you'll find out a little bit more about that, why I don't like them, later. Listen, substance use disorder. I'm not going down too much of a rabbit trail, but stick with me. Substance use disorder is objectively quantifiable. So the way that we determine if somebody has a substance use disorder is how many of these 11 criteria that are in the DSM-5 you meet. And if you meet 2 or 3 of them, it would be a mild substance use disorder. 4 or 5 moderate, 6 and above, like where I was when I was using, would be severe. Mild, all right, whatever. Moderate, we're definitely paying attention, and severe, intervene. It doesn't matter the substance. Cannabis, just put it right in here with all of these other things. So any of these boxes that you can check off and has to do with cannabis are getting us towards somebody who either does or does not have an objectively diagnosable substance cannabis use disorder. I'd like you to pay special attention to number 10, if you see it's underlined here. And the reason why is basically forthcoming. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it tonight, but I've gone pretty deep into this one, and the chapter in the new book is done on it. I really think that there's some key stuff with a person's tolerance to cannabis that has led the market in the direction that it is. And since there's no lethal overdose associated with it, people are basically building tolerances into perpetuity, and then requiring some of these absolutely insane products to feel anything. But a little bit more on that lately. Here's something insane. When was DSM-5? 4 years ago? I think it was 4.
More than that, I think.
Was it?
I think it was more like 6 years ago. Somebody will put it in there. I know, like, Tom Connell's on here. He can tell us.
Oh, yeah. When was DSM, Tom? So this is the manual that mental health professionals, doctors, psychologists, all this kind of thing, use to determine if somebody has a 2013. Good Lord, is it time that we updated that thing. Ginger, if you get invited to the board, I've been putting this in everybody's ear I know who's weigh in on DSM.
It's 2013, Ben.
20, yeah.
I just Googled it, 2013.
Ginger beat you to it.
Oh.
If if we could please weight the criteria for substance use disorder, I think it would be incredible, but I digress. So what happened in 2013 when this DSM came out, and it's the one we still use, this happened. DSM gave us objective diagnostic criteria for cannabis withdrawal. Never before. And it's not because we missed it. Okay, like, listen, if doctors can bill insurance companies for treating something, you had better believe that they are going to do it. And it's not that we didn't talk about withdrawal from cannabis. It's that it wasn't a thing. That 15 years ago, to put out there the idea of physical dependence on cannabis was to be laughed out of any serious circle that you were in. And the idea of withdrawal from cannabis, that's where you got people being like, oh, withdrawal from cannabis. So you're playing less video games and you realize Yanni's music sucks. Is that what withdrawal from cannabis looks like? No. Withdrawal from cannabis on the global severity scale, talking to you medical professionals right now, is listed as markedly ill. Withdrawal from cannabis, I hypothesize, is one of the primary reasons that people with this issue are leaving treatment against medical advice and against clinical advice, because we don't understand it and we don't treat it. And one of the biggest problems with not treating it is we have no pharmacologic interventions. There's no drug that we can give you that will help with the symptoms of this. Anything else, there's a drug for that. We can make detoxing hurt less, which can keep a person engaged. And hopefully, as we say that inside of my world, what we always say is hopefully we can keep them engaged while what we're trying to teach them makes the longest 18-inch journey in the world between the head and the heart, where it goes from something that people understand to something that they know and they believe. Thank God we are in FDA phase 2 trials on the first ever drug to treat cannabis withdrawal. I'm not going to say more. If anybody who's on this thing wants to jump in and say anything, you're more than welcome, because I don't know what's okay or not. But I am crossing my fingers and waiting every day for this to come out, because it's going to aid us so much in the direct treatment of the cannabis dependent patient, because this detox is loud, man, and people don't know how to deal with it, and it's nasty. Day 1 is going to suck. Day 3 or 4 is when it's going to get its absolute worst, and then it's really going to calm down, and you're going to see a huge spike in symptoms again somewhere between day 12 and 15. And the big problem with that is that we are not prepared to handle that with our patients. We're not meeting their needs in their detox from THC, which is having more and more of them fail out of treatment prematurely. Oh, great, fantastic. So the individual who is pioneering this, thank God, is on our call tonight, and I will, in the Q&A section, ask her to answer any questions that you might have about this forthcoming drug. So in that book that we wrote, the chapter that we wrote about cannabis addiction and treatment, here's like the 70,000 foot takeaway from it. Okay, like there's a ton more, but here's the big stuff. The big stuff is it's very real and it's not easy to treat. Simple. The other thing is it really does require long stays in treatment and antipsychotic medication. So think about it this way. Before we are able, I mean, not me, I'm not a physician, but before our psychiatrist is able to provide and prescribe appropriate interventions, appropriate drugs for a person's mental health condition, they really have to find baseline. for that individual. And that means that's why, like always, when you've got somebody who's presenting with a co-occurring disorder, that's a mental health disorder as well as an addiction, that's why you always have to remove the substances first, because we got to kind of get down to like the bottom of the pyramid, and we got to say, okay, what's really going on with the brain chemistry? How do we treat that? We got to remove the substance first. It's a long time for us to remove the substance. And again, without getting into the biology of it all, THC is fat soluble. It's taking sometimes weeks. I asked our clinical team a couple of weeks ago what they thought, and they said, we'll go with about 2 weeks, 2 weeks as being about the average before we see somebody presenting with the real baseline, 2 weeks of abstinence from THC. And earlier this year, we actually had to discharge a patient because he was past our capabilities into a site-specific lockdown facility because at the end of 5 weeks, we still hadn't found psychiatric baseline for him. He had a full psychotic, in all likelihood, break, but you'll never know till anyway, he had a full psychotic episode and a very, very long-term reaction to 6 months of concentrates. He was 56 years old. You never have psychosis hit you at 56. If it hasn't hit you by the time you're in your mid to late 20s, you're cool. And even that's a little bit late. And so this guy's THC-induced psychosis, we weren't able to get under wraps and had to discharge him at 5 weeks. So here's another crazy thing. Traditional rates of addiction to THC always hovered around 10%. So there's this giant study, like the N was in the hundreds of thousands, really solid science too. They teased out all sorts of different things, the important stuff. And what they told us in 2012 was that about 10% of everybody who consumes cannabis will at some point meet the diagnostic criteria for a cannabis use disorder. I always thought that was totally inconsequential because 10% of the population is genetically predisposed to begin with. Like if all of us found ourselves on a desert island tomorrow, 10% of you would be doing weird stuff with me in the corner with like coconuts so that we could spike our dopamine, because that's just genetic predisposition. So that same study releases data again in October of 2020, and the addiction rates from THC had gone from 10% to 30%. And they said, so anytime you got a longitudinal study, a long-term study, and something insane like that happens in it, the authors are going to write about it. And so the authors in this one were like, it's just potency. We just think that this is a result of potency. It's too strong. That's why we went from 10 to 30%. The other thing that I can tell you with some pretty solid certainty is that a lot of these patients require physical detox and direct medical intervention. If any of you are familiar with the term hyperemesis, or as our friend Dr. Lev in California coined the phrase scromiting, screaming and vomiting at the same time, we know that there can be some very extreme reactions to intense cannabis use. One of those is cyclic vomiting or cannabis-induced hyperemesis. When we have a potential patient, we're up in the mountains. And so when we have a potential patient with a significant history of THC use, our medical director, he's really conservative. He typically likes to detox them in Denver because the hyperemesis, the cyclic vomiting, there are several deaths a month associated with that because of the dehydration. So if a person's not properly managed during that, it can be fatal. It's a very extreme case when that happens, but it can be. That's how nutty this stuff is, man. It's just not the same. We went and ruined weed. So lessons learned from Colorado. I'd like you all to write down House Bill 1317, especially any of you who are involved in the lawmaking process, and you'll see how important it is. The old 80-20 rule that we've got is roughly stated about 80% of the booze in this country is consumed by about 20% of the consumers. This is my wife's birthday yesterday, and 6 of us went out, and I think there were a total of 5 margaritas drank at dinner. None of those people are keeping the alcohol industry in business. Now, if I were still drinking, the 9 margaritas that I would have had last night as they carried me back to the car would have helped. The data that we've got in Colorado from 2020, again, I don't even have 2021's data yet, shows us that almost 76% of the THC is being purchased by 6% of the users. This is two things. This is the chronic, addicted individual. This person is consuming an average of 8 times daily. This is somebody with a severe cannabis use disorder. This is also a demographic that is what we call rounding. So getting a med card, going to a dispensary, buying their limit, and then reselling it to young people. Dr. Christian Thurstone out here in Colorado, who runs the state's largest adolescent treatment program, the number one thing that kids are in treatment for is THC. And the number one way that they get it is from somebody with a medical card. So lessons learned from Colorado for you guys in Pennsylvania. People are getting medical cards so that they can round and resell to other people. And what House Bill 1317 did, in addition to quite a few other things, the fight was incredible. I'm writing about it in the new book. What they did was they said that this gray area between 18 and 21, where a person could go get a card without parental notification, stopped. You actually had to be sick. None of this chronic pain, none of this opiate dependence bullshit. Sorry. None of this PTSD stuff. You're not going to cure the opiate addict with THC. And THC is contraindicated for use with post-traumatic stress disorder. I have PTSD. I treat it with medication and psychotherapy. If I want to make it worse, I would use THC. It is contraindicated for use, but you can't really measure it. You can't take a blood test for chronic pain. You can't take a blood test for PTSD. So what you get are these young people who were claiming chronic pain, claiming PTSD, those other things that Kim showed at the beginning, getting their med card and then reselling it to people. So that is absolutely a pretty significant source of how young people are getting their THC-based products in Pennsylvania right now. And I've got to encourage you to don't take 10 years, how we did, to pass something like House Bill 1317. Take a look at what we did and you'll see why it's so important. So, dang it. You know what? This is the greatest freaking video in the world. And I want to show it, but I'm going to run out of time, so I'm not going to. So
I have this I can put on the follow-up page.
Don't you just love this?
60-week. Yeah, I love it. I'll put it on the follow-up page.
This is the tolerance thing. So here you go, Pennsylvanians. If you want to never have a problem with cannabis, these are the 3 factors to consider: age of onset, frequency of use, and THC potency. There's one other, it's genetic predisposition, but I mean, maybe they're working on that somewhere in China, but we're not right now, so who knows. If you want to build an addict, these are the 3 things that you do. You get them to start early, you get them using frequently, and you make sure they're on the strong stuff. So here is a visual that I have found helps me a ton, especially with kids. And I hope it'll help you too. Kim, this is a new one. So your brain isn't fully developed until you're in your mid-20s. Ladies, probably earlier, 23, 24. Guys, there was a study last year that suggested it might be as late as 28 or 29 for some men, like not surprising. But the word that they use for it is, it's called frontal lobe myelination. Let's skip all of the sciencey stuff. It's when your brain gets its helmet. It's when your frontal lobe is fully protected as much as it can be. Every time you put a psychoactive chemical into your brain, you got the potential to mess with it a little bit. So I want you to think of your brain as your cell phone. This works great with kids. And I want you to think of every time you consume THC, you're dropping your cell phone. We would never drop our cell phone until we get our case. And you don't get your case until you're in your mid-20s. So any use prior to frontal lobe myelination is problematic. The further you are from it, I was in an incredible seminar today on neonatal exposure. So all the way into pre-birth. But the farther you are from frontal lobe myelination, the worse the consequences, as a rule. So it's way better to begin at 25 than it is at 15. Better to begin at 14 than 12. The farther you are from frontal lobe myelination, the bigger the problem we have. Don't drop your phone without the case on it. Next thing, frequency of use. Anybody who's getting intoxicated more than once a month-ish, I don't like to see that. If somebody's getting drunk every other weekend, okay, I'm not like super concerned, but I'm kind of paying attention. If somebody's getting drunk every weekend, we're paying attention. If they're doing it daily, you better believe we're paying attention. And if somebody is getting intoxicated on any substance multiple times a day, we got a problem. If you're going to drop your phone, don't do it all the damn time. Drop your phone after you get the case on it when you're going to the Pink Floyd laser show. Drop your phone if you actually want to understand what the movie The Wall is about. Drop your phone seldom, cautiously, and never drive. And never do it before you got your case on it. Third, potency. You don't want to have a problem with THC, consume something under 8%. Ginger, I apologize. I know that is a dramatic bastardization of the science, but it'll hold true for the most part. Don't consume more than 8% THC and make sure it's got CBD in it. Anytime we get into double-digit THC consumption, we got problems. 10% on up. So the last lesson on this is, if you're going to drop your phone, not too often, and after you have your case on it, would you just drop it from like a couple inches off the ground and not climb up on a ladder and like end zone spike it again and again? That's not good. But it's very good if you are the people selling the THC. Remember that slide a little bit back about how 6% of the people are consuming 3/4 of the product or purchasing 3/4 of the product? They know exactly who those people are. They target them explicitly because that's the gravy. Hey man, you come out to Colorado and on your way up to Breckenridge, stop by the dispensary and buy some gummies and giggle sitting around the fire that night. Okay, you are worth nothing to the cannabis industry in Colorado. You don't matter. You were like the people having a margarita last night at dinner. If, however, you are consuming 8, 10, 12 times a day, we treat people who consume multiple grams of concentrate daily, 2-3 grams daily sometimes. That's the customer they need. Just like tobacco, just like opiates. Listen, y'all, we had opiates for a long time before we found ourselves in the opiate crisis. It wasn't until those pricks over at Purdue started deciding that we should take it for, a hangnail and aggressively marketing it to all of us that we ended up in the opiate crisis that we did. The problem is that the problemed users are the best customers. And the best way to make a problemed user is to get them started early. So all this nonsense about we don't want your kids to use and we're in this with you, the industry saying the thing, is just a load of crap. It's the same thing as the tobacco company saying it. They absolutely want early consumption because early consumption pays the bills. There's your big lesson learned from Colorado. You have an unregulated industry No federal oversight. State departments that are nowhere near qualified to do this, trying to manage a multi-billion-dollar industry. By the end of this year, we will have spent almost $26 billion on THC in this country. Just for contrast, because I just put this in the book, I thought it was interesting. By the end of this year, we will have spent $24 billion on books in this country. So let's just kind of put that in the worst circling the drain category. Like if you're spending more money on THC than books. But if there's money like that behind it, just make no mistake, they know who their best customers are. They cultivate them, they hold them, and they keep them coming back. Consumption trends. Oh, yeah. I did it again, Kim. I got a half an hour and okay, I'm going to go like super duper quick through consumption trends. Kim, I'll send you this deck. You can give it to anybody in the world you want.
Thank you.
Everything is cited at the end of this to a standard allowing for continuing medical education. Take my name off of it, put your name on the front of it, give it to whoever you want. Just get this information out there, you guys, please. So I'm going to skip through this quickly, but you'll know it. So the three things: concentrates, edibles, and vaping. Concentrates, this was awesome. Kind of threw this in for you young people. I used to get high back in high school and college, and boy, was it great. I was giggly, creative, and happy, and had a great time, whether I was with my friends or by myself. Now I'm older. It seems like things have turned. When I smoke now, instead of being happy and creative, I'm tired, depressed, paranoid, and introverted. I want to get high like I did back in the day. What am I doing wrong? And what do I need to do differently? You need to start smoking the flower again. This was in the Portland Mercury. You need to start smoking the flower again and stop smoking concentrates, because they're what's causing this. But concentrates are making up the majority of the market in Colorado. What's a concentrate, you ask? I'm not going to get into all of the stuff of it. I love to spend about 2 hours just talking concentrates. But bottom line is they can get you here. A concentrate can get you to 99.9% THC. To contextualize how insane that is, we lose track of the data at about 16%. And I'll show you what 16% is doing to the human brain and body in a couple of slides from now. 99% THC should never enter the human brain or body. Remember how it's just like all cool and like super accommodating and liberal, like smoke weed if you want to and listen to Pink Floyd and shit. It's not concentrates. They have no place in the human brain and body. Concentrates, however, are making up the majority of the market. My hypothesis is because of the tolerance issues associated with it. So these are concentrates in their nastiest form. This is called a distillate. If you look to the far right, this is what won this year's Cannabis Cup, 2021's Cannabis Cup. Duke made a Cheech and Chong joke. This isn't Cheech and Chong. This is Walter White. This is applied chemistry at its finest. This isn't a plant. In fact, here's something that really tends to frustrate industry people when I point it out to them, because I've yet to hear a decent retort to it. Concentrates are to cannabis what crack is to coca. This is a highly refined byproduct of the plant. However, people are still calling it weed and selling it as weed in Pennsylvania. This is it before it cools. So I'm going to play this without the volume. This is somebody taking a hit of a concentrate at the dispensary in California. They give free samples all the time. It's a somewhat common reaction to a person's first hit with it, but the why is the most interesting thing. And yeah, there's some shock value in this for sure. But I want to get to the why. So cannabis is a vasodilator. It's that old, remember the glaucoma thing, like it reduces interocular pressure because it brings blood pressure down. And yeah, totally true. Cannabis it's a vasodilator. Concentrates, however, are functioning as a vasoconstrictor, meaning that they are spiking blood pressure and spiking heart rate out to about 50 beats per minute for up to 3 hours. A lot of my time spent in the professional athletics world, and this is a big deal. If you spike blood pressure and spike heart rate, it also feels, it's the same feeling as an anxiety attack, but a lot of times you have this kind of thing happen. So the million-dollar question right now is, why do concentrates present as a vasoconstrictor when cannabis is a vasodilator? The answer to that is, and I think I'm answering on behalf of all of medical science right now. We don't know. However, we continue to put this in a package, sell it in a storefront, and thereby entering into a social contract with everybody that it is safe, that there's some great they behind the scenes making sure that you're not consuming anything that you shouldn't. And we can't even tell you why it's functioning as a vasoconstrictor rather than a vasodilator. You should really watch some videos on YouTube or whatever the kids are doing today. TikTok, probably. Kids are stupid. They put absolutely everything on the internet. Watch some videos of people consuming concentrates. These are concentrates. This is cannabis in your 21st century. These are all different forms. And note the language here. Cannabis, neat. That is not cannabis. That's a honey oil extracted from cannabis using butane. It's not weed, man. This is a live resin. Here's a shatter. This is another form of live resin. There's a powder, reverse osmosis, cold water extracted. You can actually inhale that, sniff that. That's a form of glue. There's your preloaded syringes. Here's another form of shatter, honey. There's anything you could ever hope for. So vaping, I just want to give you this simple. Vaping is potent and discreet. And no smoke, no smell, no mess. This is the problem that we got with so many young people consuming, is they really could vape 10 feet away from you, and like maybe you would smell a little like gingerbread or birthday cake or whatever the flavor they've got. You don't smell the weed. In fact, if you can see this ad, I love this. Amazing fun flavors, no cannabis smell. It's just like put at the bottom of that, kids in school. Sorry, teachers. This stuff is what people are using, young people are using with great impunity, because nobody's there to catch them for it. So that's a functional pen. You can actually write with it. That's a cup that heats to 700 degrees, and it's great for the home or the office. There's a lighter, an asthma inhaler. There's a working smartwatch, a backpack, lipstick, a marker, vape, THC vaping hoodies. There's a THC vaping smartphone case, USB drive, this Tic Tac. You should read it. It says real Tic Tacs that rattle, but it's a THC specific vaporizer. And then of course I'm going to end it with the obligatory bubblegum flavor. Edibles. I'm just writing this chapter right now. These are a problem. I'm pushing up on time. 10 milligrams is a legal dose. We are putting multiple doses inside of one, like those gummy bears, for instance, each had 100 milligrams, and a thing that said, don't forget to cut your gummy bear into tenths, wait 40 minutes, and then eat more if you want to. The real scary thing is that the 10 milligrams was built with the idea of the flower in mind, essentially baking the plant cannabis into brownies and cookies and things like that. But we are now infusing it with a distillate. And you remember that the distillate was the pure 99.9% isolated Delta 9 THC. And we still are allowing 10 milligrams. And anybody who tells you they can do the math on that is just lying to you. We don't know the math between 1 milligram of flour and 1 milligram of distillate inside of an edible. But this is what they're putting in it. We also have real volume issues. This is something the size of a graham cracker that's got 1,000 milligrams in it, so 100 legal servings. Here's a cake pop with 1,000 legal servings. I'm sorry, 100 legal servings in it. We just actually pulled this up this afternoon and read the instructions from it, where it said break off 1/100th of the cake pop. For real. Everything else, man. Hot sauce, condiments, coffee, K-cup coffee, lemonade, granola bars, hard candies, ice cream. If it can be introduced into the human body, it's being made with THC in it. Nose spray. This is a topical ointment to get you intoxicated. This is a swallowable pill. There's your suckers. Here's tea, THC tea. Just make it and walk around school with it. Any form of gummy you'd ever want to see. Facsimiles of other candies, obviously made to look like a Reese's, so you could just do it wherever. This was awesome. I'm going to call these guys and ask for a statement for the book, because I just want somebody to try to convince me that pot rocks are for grownups, that a popping THC-based candy is something that's intended for an adult. So wait till you see the chapter on that one. We'll see what they say. Tarts, THC-infused alcohol, synergistic effect. Won't get into that. 1 + 1 = 3. Don't combine the two. THC-infused soda. Keep up with rap culture, THC-infused syrup, weed water, maybe the pinnacle of human achievement. We built the pyramids, we walked on the moon, we sequenced the genome, we've made weed water. Wow. Juice, chai tea, mints, wipes, potato chips. These are actually fairly potent THC potato chips. THC tampons. These are to intoxicate. If you remember the alcohol soaked tampon craze that went around a couple of years ago. THC water soluble drops. The most intense thing that I've seen in the last couple of years, because with one of these, anything can be an edible. You can watch me open my soda, obviously not an edible. I can put a drop in it and boom, I've got an edible. I can put a couple on my broccoli at dinner. So we got to watch out for this stuff. THC gum. I think you're probably getting the point. There's lots of THC related everything. Breast spray, sex lube, suppositories. So here's a couple of new and exciting things that I wanted to share with you. We found out a few years ago so your ACE score, if you're not familiar with it, Kim, get somebody to talk about ACE scores if you haven't already. I would assume you have. But your ACE scores is an adverse childhood event. And aside from genetics, it's the biggest predictor that we have, not only of whether or not somebody will have a substance use disorder, but length of life is actually a big part of this too. It's how many adverse childhood events you had. And there's this chart and all sorts of business. But what we found is that more parents using cannabis at home since legalization is leading to more exposure to intoxication in cannabis at home, which is contributing to increases in ACE scores. So the child who has a cannabis user at home on average will have a higher ACE score than the one who doesn't. Causation, correlation, lots of great questions there. Who knows? Moral of the story, parents don't have THC at home if you're really concerned about the kids' ACE scores, which you should be. Cannabis and family dysfunction. So one of the things that we found, and I'm going to get into great detail in this in just a minute, is the normalization of use makes it so hard for some people to stop. In fact, I want to get to that right now. The mental health things, there is so much written on it. I'm going to summarize it drastically. A couple of years from now, I think they're going to say to our generation, in the same way that I said to my grandpa's generation, you morons actually thought 3 out of 4 doctors preferred camels? Really? They're going to say that same thing to us about high potency THC. They're going to say, you didn't tell us about the link between mental illness and high potency THC. Not the link, the causal. And we're just going to have to answer for that, because these numbers just keep getting worse and worse and worse every time we turn around. I give a whole 2-hour talk on this subject, but what I want to get to is this. You're considering young people, because this is something I've never shared with you guys before, Kim, and it's I've been working on it for a long time. First and foremost, consider what their reality is. Consider that the most common word associated with marijuana for people between 18 and 24 in this country is medicinal. That they have grown up differently than we have. We grew up where it was still a taboo. They've grown up with it as medicine. and as recreational. I love what you said at the beginning, Kim. Let's leave that language behind. If you hard charge into something with a kid, a young person, and you start telling them about psychosis and mental illness and physical issues associated with it and addiction and addiction and addiction, they're not going to listen to you because their reality is so different than yours. So play the long game with them. Ask them more than you tell them. Hey, I was in this presentation and somebody was saying that it's gotten like so much stronger that it doesn't even really resemble the plant. What do you know about that? Hey, somebody told me that you can actually get physically addicted to THC today. Is that a thing? What do you know about CBD and THC and how they interact? Ask them questions. Engage them. Now, this one is, there's no black and whites for it. Don't let them pigeonhole you into reefer madness, but don't be a pushover. There are plenty of things I simply will not argue with people. The stuff that doesn't matter to me. And your not matter could be different. Yeah, man, but Thomas Jefferson grew weed and he and George Washington used to. Oh, no shit. That's awesome. Let's talk about your use. I don't care about historical stuff. I'm not interested in debating what why it's still one of 50 essential herbs inside of traditional Chinese medicine. I'm not going to react negatively to everything they say. I'm going to choose my battles, and then I'm not going to be a pushover when it comes to it. Because when they say things like, yeah, but you can't get addicted, I'm going to be like, dude, let's look at Mom Strong. Let's go see the work Sally Schindel has done. Go to the Kim's website and see some of this stuff. No way, man. And the last one is, because I want to get to this next slide too. I'm a 12-step sober guy. I don't do other stuff. And I've had to come to terms with the reality that harm reduction is something we got to move towards with these people. I will take less frequently. I will take less potent if I can move them in that direction. This summer, I had a conversation with a family in New York, and their son was consuming concentrates. And I said, well, let me get on the phone with them. If you want to like hire me to give a talk or something, I'm the worst person in the world to get in touch with. If you call me and tell me you got a son or a daughter or a nephew who needs help, I'm on the phone with them that afternoon, because it's how I stay sober, frankly. And where I ended up with this young person was he was going to not smoke concentrates anymore. And he committed to no more than twice a week. And it was a win. It wasn't the win we wanted, but it was a win. And the reality is that we've got to start looking for anything we can on this one, because we're just losing this fight, man. These kids still think that it's good for them. So this is the most important thing after that potency thing that I want to share with you. If you are a provider in this field, you know what a microaggression is. If you don't, here's a great example. Boy, Kim sure is smart for a woman, isn't she? You've done so well for a Black man. Cutting, deep, nasty stuff that has the guise of a compliment over it. Microaggressions in this are driving people to use. It's just weed. You're not using anything else. You don't use any actual drugs, just weed. You think you're addicted to cannabis? Huh. My dear friend Andy, who went through this with a family member, likes to say, I've decided that the 3 most dangerous words in the English language are, it's just weed. You've got to recognize that people want to leave. They don't want, like at some point inside of their journey to recovery, they want an excuse out. And if they remember you saying, yeah, that one's not addictive, at least you've never done real drugs, that could be the thing that they hone in on. I want you to remember that the progression of cannabis use disorder is slower than other substances. And oftentimes you don't have the same giant reaction. You don't have the same physical issues. You don't have the same legal issues. Listen, if it wasn't for the involvement of the legal system, I wouldn't be sober. And I can all but guarantee I would have died before 21. It takes so much longer for somebody to realize that they have an issue with this, that motivation can be very challenging to find, because the other thing that's happening is it's been so normalized inside of their peer groups. Listen, have you ever seen a person wearing a pair of heroin socks or like a meth hat? No, man. But the normalization that's taking place inside of peer groups, a lot of the times the people you're talking to have built their identity around their use, their political identity, their social identity, and they really do. They've got a weed hat. They got a weed tattoo. And so the normalization that takes place inside of these peer groups, you got to imagine what it's like from their perspective. If Kim goes to all 50 of you on this thing and says, hey, you guys, I need to stop drinking. I got a problem. I'm a little scared with my alcohol intake. There's not a single person who's not going to throw her arm around her and be like, we got you. We got you. If I come to you and say, I'm nervous about my THC consumption, I think I'm smoking too much weed, there are going to be plenty of people who are going to be like, weed. Well, Kim's got a real issue. It gets so normalized inside of these groups that the first thing that happens is when this individual goes to their friends, their peer group, and they say, hey guys, I think I might have a problem. They're going to say to them, it's natural, it's non-addictive. Nobody's ever died from it, because in the back of their mind, they're all going, we use the same. If you have a problem, that means no, you can't get addicted to cannabis. It's not a thing. So not only have they already fought that to get to you, they're going to continue to fight it when they go back. And you had better believe that the cultural considerations that exist inside of many communities inside of this country are way more real than you know. A couple of years ago, I do a lot of work inside of professional athletics, and I was working with an NFL player who was getting ready to go home for Christmas. And he said, kind of musing about how Christmas is going to be challenging. And I was like, I know, man, holidays totally suck. And he's like, no, man, you don't understand about cannabis Christmas. And I said, I do not understand about cannabis Christmas. Tell me about it. African-American from inner city, Kansas City. And he said, my grandma saves up. She buys a couple of ounces and everything is on her table. He said, man, I won't see my cousins if I don't go over there where they're all smoking. I probably won't even see my grandma. Last thing I want to point out on this is Marijuana Anonymous is online. And this was one of the good things from COVID. It used to be, you guys would have had to go into Philadelphia or New York for a meeting. Now, the meetings are absolutely everywhere. And if you want to see a person with a cannabis use disorder, like get a cold drink of water on a hot day, take them to an MA meeting. Because when they walk in and everybody else is Me Tooing them, it's a big deal. When everyone is like, oh, dude, I understand that. It's a really big deal.
Ben, not to interrupt you, but on that same vein, there's also Maranon meetings now. So for family members, and I've attended a few, and there's one on Saturdays. They're mostly online. There's like one in Idaho, but the rest are virtual. And there's one on Saturdays for specifically for family members whose loved one has cannabis-induced psychosis or cannabinoid hyperemesis syndrome.
That's incredible. Thank you. Mm-hmm. Kim, because I took it up a little too close to the point, and you sent me so many awesome questions before this, I'd like to ask you to pick a couple of those that you think.
Oh man, so many. Well, a couple of them that are in the same vein that I think are really interesting are about driving. And I'm wondering if we're talking again about lessons learned, you know what the data is like there in Colorado. And well, there's another question in there, but there is no field test. It's complicated. What is under the influence with cannabis? Like, what's the half-life? What's the, how do you deal with that?
It's a great moment to ask me this question, because in writing the current chapter, I was just sitting down with a drug recognition expert with Colorado State Patrol today. So a drug recognition expert is a member of law enforcement who's specially trained to recognize impairment. And cannabis, of course, is a big part of it. So yeah, the biggest problem that we have is that we don't have a standardized roadside test. In fact, nothing is admissible unless it's been determined by a drug recognition expert. And they're pretty tough to get a hold of, tough to get onto the scene. Marilyn Hustis, who's the country's leading researcher on this, told me that I will not see a breathalyzer type test in my lifetime. It's simply too complex. And if any of you have taken the time to read through my very marginally written book, you'll know that I say that this is a $1 trillion idea. Like, whoever nails this is going to be able to sell it to everyone on the planet, and nobody's nailed it yet. So that should give you an idea of how complex it is. We don't have the ability to test for acute intoxication.
Right. Someone asked about an 18 to 25-year-old using THC to sleep at night. This is something we hear a lot from people that, it really does help me with sleep. What are your thoughts about that?
It does. And in fact, one of the problems that you have is that a very loud sign and symptom of withdrawal from cannabis is sleeplessness. So when the person tells you, this is my medicine, I use it to sleep, what they're actually doing is using it to keep the symptoms of withdrawal at bay. It would be the same thing as the alcoholic saying, I use alcohol to treat my tremors. But it's real for them. And the big issue that you've got on the sleep front is that, just like alcohol, THC will knock you out, but it is much less likely that you're going to enter REM sleep if you've gone to sleep because of the THC or because of the alcohol. So there's lots of different qualities of sleep, and passing out isn't the same as going into good REM sleep. So we actually can say this with total certainty. We know this one for sure. We should not be using THC as a sleep aid, because it's keeping one from REM sleep. Sleep is, I'm starting to think, maybe the absolute bottom of the pyramid, and the thing that we need to consider more seriously than anything else. What I would encourage you, whoever asked that question, if you're not familiar with the term sleep hygiene, look it up and consider discussing that with the 18 to 25-year-old who you're referencing, because there are so many things we can do to improve our sleep that don't require external chemicals entering our body.
And so our clinical advisor is a really terrific guy named Michael Blanche. Some of the folks on the call, I'm sure, know who he is. He points out that, I think it's page 516 of the DSM, 518 of the DSM, at the top of the page are the symptoms of withdrawal from cannabis use disorder. And what's interesting is the symptoms start at the top of the page. So he'll show it to a client who says, I need to keep using it because when I don't use it, this is why I use it. Right. And so he says, is this why you use it? Because these symptoms? And they're like, yeah. And they flip the page back and it says symptoms of withdrawal. So it's actually perfectly laid out in the DSM-5.
Wow.
Yeah,
what page was that?
What's that?
What page?
518.
That's awesome. If you don't mind, I'm going to steal that strategy.
Steal it. So someone is asking, is regular, and this was an advanced question, regular testing suggested for teenagers if you suspect that they're using? Is this effective to do drug testing in your view? I have thoughts, but I'll keep my mouth shut.
No, you don't need to keep your mouth shut. I don't know the answer to that. The minute I start giving parenting advice, we're all going to be in some real trouble. Yes for some, no for others. Kim, what do you think?
I don't want to have that relationship with my child where I'm having to check their urine, and I would rather see them do it with a professional. If there's someone who you feel needs to be tested, I think you've already got your answer. In my feeling, that's my feeling. I just hate to see parents go through this with their child, because you have to watch them pee. I'm sorry, you have to do it, and you have to be really thorough about it. You have to have a lot of panels, because they get very slick with how to fool it. So I feel like if there's a way to have this done, whether it's in an IOP setting, intensive outpatient program, something like that, I would really recommend something like that rather than have this caustic relationship with your child.
I think that's a great point. And, if you're on a contract with them, that's a totally different thing. And that's something I would encourage you to if that's the direction that you go, those things have to be very black and white, if then. Like, if a kid comes back from treatment or they've been using, or you can only stay here if you maintain abstinence, then it makes good sense. But make sure that that's lined out very clearly in black and white.
Right. And they also asked about reliability, and you do need a lot of panels, correct? Like, what do you guys use at the Foundry?
18. It is, reliability for these is moving towards better for sure, but there still are lots of ways to cheat a test. It's usually going to show up as a diluted or an incomplete. But reliability is always going to be an issue. You want the real blood's not worth anything because it's ends up in your glucose. Hair follicle is always going to be your best.
Right. Takes more time, but yeah. Can you talk about the impact? This is an advanced question. The impact of today's cannabis on the onset of psychosis in young people.
Yes, it's very severe. Again, this is 2 hours of just talking to quantify this for you, but I would encourage you to go to PubMed or any of the other places where the data is held. Going to pot is sort of the study that most cite that continues to be ongoing. But the link between cannabis and psychosis, particularly in young people, is profound. And we've also got past the causation correlation problem. We have actually been able to determine it to be causal in about a quarter of all of the psychosis that people experience when they are consuming. So yes, THC is causal of psychosis and all of its nasty forms, anxiety, schizophrenia, et cetera. But it's also just tightly linked to somebody who has that genetic predisposition. It's profound, it is what I can say. Profound.
It truly is. Delta 8 is everywhere here in PA.
Yeah.
I know you need another hour probably. And so actually, somebody just popped it in. I was asking this anyway. Thank you to this person. Yes, THCO, Delta 8. We also have a lot of kratom, whatever it is. Do you see it in Colorado, or is there no need because you have all the adult use everywhere?
We've certainly got it, but you're going to see it more in states like yours. Kratom's a big issue because the receptors it affects are opiates, not cannabinoid. Very, very different substance. But the Delta 8, I think I can very easily answer that by just saying to you, essentially think of like a light beer, like 3.2 versus whatever a full strength beer is. It's still definitely intoxicating, but it's not as intoxicating. And the important lesson here is you will fail a UA with that. THCO is a completely and totally different thing. The best advice I can give you without burning up your whole evening, just Google THCO and read a little bit about it. There's some really good information out there. In fact, NIDA's published something recently about it.
Right. And one of those notes from my colleague Judy from the continuing legal ed thing was a comprehensive bill that will address both medical and adult use cannabis is expected in the next legislative session. Delta 8 THC, as well as the definition of intoxication, will also be addressed. So our state is obviously working on some of these kinds of things. And I think, Ben, just the biggest lesson learned kind of question that I have is, I know you speak so frequently around the country. Are there states that are doing it? Are there best practices that you can just rattle off quickly? What's really important to do here in the state of Pennsylvania that we can tell our legislators about, that sort of thing?
Kill the commercial market. Keep the profiteers completely and totally out of them. Get it going. I'd look to Oregon to some extent, even though they've really screwed up on that one. Vermont is probably your best example. The District of Columbia is not bad. They have basically moved to a decriminalization without commercial sales. And what you have to do is get the profiteers gone. As soon as you've got big business dependent on shareholder returns and CEOs who went to Harvard Business School, we're going to have very big issues with this. The best advice I can give you is get them gone. Number 2, set a potency cap. The places that have set potency caps before are only setting them on the flower, which is Worthless, absolutely worthless. It's a giveaway for the industry. You have to have a potency cap on all products. That is coming to Colorado thanks to House Bill 1317. So you've got to cap potency. And I would cap potency. I would take a cap at 95%. I would take a cap at 90% because 90% is going to be less damaging than 95%. But realistically, if you're going to end up following anything like science, your caps are going to be 8%.
One last one. Is it true that marijuana tests positive for a long time after no longer using? Yes, it is true. Correct. Yes.
It is the most extreme example that the science will give us. Again, back to Marilyn Hustis, would be 72 days post-consumption. This would be somebody with a very high BMI and in all likelihood a female and a chronic user of concentrates. So your general rule is 2 to 4 weeks-ish. But yeah, as it's fat soluble, and since we all break down fat very, very differently, it's very dependent on the individual, age, sex, BMI, metabolism rates, all these things.
Ben, I wouldn't have spent like another half an hour just thanking you and gushing about this is why you're so busy. You're just too darn good at this. We need you. We need a clone of you here in PA. I really don't know how to thank you. I'm going to just see what's in the chat. Is that different on a blood or a urine test? Sorry, that didn't realize that was a follow-up.
Yeah, they're really different.
They're different
because it leaves your bloodstream in about 45 minutes and it moves into the glucose. So you have a really hard time measuring inside of blood when it's getting to its most reactive time inside of your body, because that's when it's moved up into your brain. So yeah, blood half-life, very, very short. Urine, much longer. Hair, longest. So blood, pee, hair.
Got it. Brilliant. Thank you so much. You're going to send me your slide deck.
Yep.
This recording will be available by the morning and it'll be on that follow-up page. I've already dropped in some things in the link. I have an ACEs thing that you talked about. I have Kiwi Bird, the Nuggets video. I've got Maranon, MA meetings, that kind of stuff. While you were talking, I was putting that in there. So, can people contact you directly if they have any other kinds of questions? Like, is there, I know you always say that, but I just want to make sure. Should we use your yahoo.com? Is that the best way? I'm making fun of you because you have a yahoo.com email.
I know. Totally. Yeah. So I don't know. Here, I'll put it into the chat. I actually got rid of voicemail this year, which was awesome. So don't try to call. If you do, you got to text me first. Absolutely hit me up. There's my email address, _Cort@Yahoo.
Okay, awesome. You are the very best. Folks, please take that survey at the end that comes up. I really appreciate you. I'm going to put that Ben's message in there. Oh, you know what? I'm going to also share all the links again one more time, just so that you guys have them handy. You all can see the chat. I really apologize for the chat thing. I think it was like one of the recent Zoom updates that they did this to us, but I fixed it, but I would have had to restart the program to make it work. So that's not good. All right, Ben, just, you're the best.
Thank you very much.
You're a treasure. Thank you. Thanks everybody so much for being with us. Take good care.
Doodles.